Hello everyone, in this video we will discuss about the microeconomic concept law of demand. We can define demand as the quantity of goods that a consumer is willing to buy at different prices. This is the definition of demand. Now there are certain keywords in this definition which needs to be noted. First is the quantity, second would be the consumer, third would be willing, and fourth would be different prices. Now let us understand the definition of demand. Now we are talking demand of certain goods. Goods can be of different types. It can be money, it can be vegetables, fruits, grains, or anything. Then consumer is one who is going to buy these goods. Third, willingness. Now willingness is how much quantity the consumer is willing to buy. That will depend upon the price of that good. At different prices, the consumer will be willing to buy different quantity of the good. Let us consider the example of potato. Now, if the potato costs rupees 10 per kg, then the consumer would be willing to buy 5 kgs of potato. However, if the price of the potato increases to 50 rupees kg, then the willingness of the consumer to purchase 5 kg would reduce, and it would be and the consumer would be willing to buy 1 kg of potatoes at this price point. While considering the law of demand, we consider the own price of the good that we are talking about, and other parameters are considered constant. So according to law of demand, the quantity demanded is inversely proportional to the own price. So the law of demand states that if the own price of a good increases, then the demand for it would reduce. We have seen it in this example of potatoes that if the price of the potato increased from 10 rupees per kg to 50 rupees kg, then the demand for potatoes reduced from 5 to 1 kgs. Now, considering the inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and the own price of the good, we have a downward sloping curve of demand. This is the demand curve. If you plot own price against the quantity demanded, then we will get the demand curve as a downward sloping curve. From this graph, we can deduce that if the price of a certain good, which was say 10, it reduces to say rupees 5, then the demand for that good increases from say 1 kg to 10 kg. If the own price of a good increases, then its demand would reduce. We can see in the graph as well that if the price of a good increases say from 5 to 10, then its demand would reduce from 10 to 1 kg. Here is a graph showing it in clearly that the price of a good has increased, then its demand would reduce. Similarly, if the price of a good has reduced, its demand would increase. Now, a related principle to demand of law is principle of diminishing marginal utility. Now let us break down this principle. Diminishing here means decreasing. Marginal would means something related to the last unit, and utility signifies satisfaction. So marginal utility here means satisfaction derived from consuming last unit of a good. Now let us consider an example where coffee costs rupees 20 per cup. Now if you have already had 5 cups of coffee, now what would be the satisfaction which you will derive from consuming the 6th cup? Probably it will not be the same as probably the satisfaction would not be the same which you have derived from consuming the first or the second cup of coffee. So we can say that the marginal utility, that the satisfaction decreases progressively with every cup consumed. So your willingness to pay rupees 20 for the sixth cup would also reduce. Obviously you will think that already so much expense has been made, and at the end of the day, after having 5 cups of coffee, you don't need a probably sixth cup of coffee. So your willingness to pay another 20 bucks would reduce. Hence your willingness to pay also reduces. Now we can say that law of demand is influenced by three things. Own price, we have seen that the demand for a good is inversely proportional to its own price. Demand of a good is also related to the price of related goods as well as income. Now let us see how the price of related goods influences the demand of a good. Now related goods can be of two types: substitute or complementary goods. Substitute goods are the goods which can be replaced with one another. Say tea can be replaced with coffee. They both have same functions, so they are easily replaceable with one another. Now in this case, demand of coffee is inversely proportional to the price of tea. So in case of substitute good, the demand of a good one is inversely proportional to the price of good 2. Now if we see, if the price of coffee increases, then demand for tea would increase. Why? Because if the price of coffee has increased, your willingness to buy coffee would reduce. Therefore, the demand for coffee would reduce, and instead you would look for cheaper options, which is tea. So you would be willing to buy tea more. Now coming on to complementary goods. An example of complementary goods would be tea and sugar. The demand for tea depends upon own price of tea and own price of sugar. Now complementary goods are the goods which cannot do without one another, like you cannot have tea without sugar. So these are complementary goods. Demand for tea depends upon own price of tea as well as the own price of sugar. If the price of sugar increases, then the cost of making tea would increase, so the price of tea would increase, hence the demand of tea would reduce. Similarly, if the price of sugar decreases, then the cost of making tea would reduce and the demand of tea would increase. Coming on to income. How income influences the demand of a good. If you have high income, you have more disposable income, that is, you have more capacity to spend or purchase, therefore you have more demand. However, if you have less income, you would have less capacity to spend and the demand for goods would reduce. Now in this income part, we have normal goods and inferior goods. Normal goods are the goods which obey the law of demand, that is, if your income increases, demand for the normal goods would increase. Say milk. If your income increases, your capacity to purchase more and more of milk would increase, therefore your demand for milk is increasing. So in this case, demand, if a good is a normal good, then its demand will be directly proportional to your income level. Similarly, in case of inferior goods are opposite to the normal goods in the sense that if income increases, the demand for inferior goods would reduce. So the demand for inferior goods is inversely proportional to your income. Inferior goods would be something as we can say, such as the coarse grains, such as bajra, ragi. Normal and inferior goods depend upon the context. So we consider food grains normal and coarse grains as inferior. However, if you follow a healthy diet, you would consider food grains as inferior good and coarse grains and more healthier food options as normal goods and food grains as inferior goods. So the classification of goods as normal and inferior is totally dependent upon the context. So if your income if you have low income, you would buy lower quality goods to reduce your expenditure. However, if your income increases, your tendency to spend more on quality products would increase. Hence, your demand for inferior goods would reduce with your income increase. Now, there's something called as giffen goods. These do not follow the law of demand. Even if the price falls, even then the demand would won't increase. That is, even if price, let's say, of jawar falls, even then there would not be a drastic increase in its demand, because there is certain limit to which one can consume jawar. Now let us consider the example of jawar. Jawar is a giffen good. Jawar is usually consumed by low income groups, and it is mainly to satisfy your daily need of hunger. So there is a limit to which jawar can be consumed. So even if the price of jawar falls to a great extent, its demand won't see a dramatic rise because there is a limit to which jawar can be consumed. Then there is Veblen goods. These contradict the law of demand. That is, with increase in price of Veblen goods, their demand also increases because of the perception of people that expensive goods are better, such as luxury cars. If the price of luxury cars increases, or say a painting or an artifact increases, its desirability would increase, and hence its demand would increase further.